Welcome all um, to the 2023-24 umpire briefing session, umpire seminar. This will build on some of the elements of last year, but will follow primarily a lot of the FIH briefing, also the Scottish hockey regulations, but also some conversations I've had with players and coaches about areas we're looking to focus on. And they're looking for
There you
umpires
go.
to improve on. So after Blair's insistence, we finally managed to get a photograph of the new kit. So that's the kit which everybody hopefully will be wearing this year, or a variation of it. But let's start and move on. Who's this for? It is normally called an umpire seminar. However, this should be watched, and those people who are clubs, those people who are umpires, disseminate this wider. It is for officials, umpire managers, coaches, umpires, coaches, managers, umpires. This is basically for everybody who's involved in the game. I think that's a really important part of this. If you're part of a club, disseminate it through your club. This is how we are looking at Scottish hockey to umpire the games at all levels. This isn't just for national leagues. This isn't just for Premier League. This is at all levels. And what we're trying to do is create a consistent approach throughout the whole of the year. We will try and keep this, I say, to 1 hour. But again, important. If you do have questions, I will ask for any questions. But if you're not understanding something, please feel free to put your hand up and ask. Colleen can warn me and advise me of that. What's the purpose of the briefing? Exactly what I've just said. How umpires apply the rules of hockey. We want it to be consistent, and we don't want left field interpretations throughout the season. We wanted to what happened on day one happens in the final day of the season. And the reason behind that, very simply, is that we are here as a sport, as an entertainment for people to enjoy. We want to encourage exciting, attractive hockey so that people get enthused and enjoy and watch it. But our primary purpose on the pitch will and always will be to ensure that a game is played safely and fairly. And I think that's a very important element to remember. Rules of hockey, they're actually guidelines. There are lots of grey areas, and it's how we deal with those grey areas and how we consistently apply interpretation of the grey areas are what we need as an umpiring cohort and as a sport to encourage players to use their skill, and so that can be shown off. So, as I've said from the very start of this, I did take. I spoke to some non-umpires, whose involvement in the game is primarily not as umpires. And I split those into coaches and players. And what I did was I asked them a series of questions about, what do you think umpires done well last season, what do you think we could do better on, and also, more importantly, what are the areas you want us to concentrate on going forward. And it's quite interesting when we spoke to them. So coaches came up. There's 5 kind of core themes came through, and that's how we umpire 3D skills. It's how we facilitate a faster game, not necessarily a frenetic game, but a faster game, allowing and encouraging the skills and showing those skills off. The physicality of the game, not that was getting, not that we were being too soft, but actually that we're being too hard, and to allow some more physicality in the game. And we'll come on to that later, because there's a difference between allowing a physical game and physicality. But that interesting was the only topic which every single coach mentioned. And related to that was compete, allowing players to compete. 2 players coming towards the ball, etc. Just because one happens to be stronger than the other, was that because that person's done more work? Allow people to compete. And lastly, communication. How we communicate with coaches and how we communicate with the players. And again, we'll come on to that later on. But that was again, that was the second most common response, was our communication, our respectful communication, respecting the coach, what they're trying to do, respecting the players, what they're trying to do, but the players also have to respect the umpire, and there was a recognition behind that. So that was the coaches. I also spoke to the players. Players were slightly different. The one area which was common to both was communication, and again, respect comes into that. A player asks a question, you respectfully answer it. You've given a decision for a reason. Quickly answer it. You don't need to get defensive. You don't need to back up. If the coach asks you a question in a polite manner, talk to them, speak to them before the game, etc. So that communication was a key theme running through both players and coaches. But interestingly, players had a slightly different point of view of other areas where they felt were most important. The breakdown, and again, there's a little section on that later on. How we deal with it, how we recognise it, consistency. They felt that even throughout a game, there wasn't a consistent application. Not saying what I agree with, this is what the players feel. Persistent fouling, for me, that fell in the breakdown, but it did come out as very different in terms of when the players were speaking about it. And the old perennial favourite, the aerial, they felt they didn't know where they stood with the aerial, and they didn't understand the aerial rule and how it was being umpired. And again, we'll come on a little bit earlier, but for me, the aerial and compete are two areas which actually are areas which have changed and how we've done over the last couple of years. So these sorts of views have shaped this presentation. But there is, of course, another important cohort, and that's the FIH. And those who've seen the FIH briefing will be able to see this. I mean, the FIH for the key areas, promoting skill, promoting flow, celebrate advantage rule, ball possession tackling, breakdown play, and player safety, and presentation, the way in which we manage to play and work with the players. That's communication in many ways. So you can see from a non-umpiring point of view where the key aspects are and where the key areas are. And that these themes will run through this presentation. But it's important to remember that, going back to the first statement of this, that whilst we're there to encourage and promote attractive, exciting hockey, we're there primarily for safety and fairness in the game. Those are the two overriding principles. Before we even get on the pitch, before we even blow a whistle, teams prepare week in, week out, coaches prepare week in, week out. They have 2 or 3 training sessions. They're preparing drills, etc. They don't expect umpires just to turn up, 5 minutes before a game and blow and be at the top of the game. So the preparation you've got is important. Those at national league level, fitness tests, keep yourself fit. Make sure that you can keep up with the game. Make sure you're aware of everything that's going on, what the teams are trying to do. But in general, at all levels of the game, there are simple things we can do. Official umpiring gear, look the part. You'd be surprised how much that impacts how people's point of view and perception of what you're doing is impacted by how you look. If you've got the official gear, bring the official gear. If not, a pair of black trousers. Everybody wants a pair of black trousers or black jogging bottoms. A different color top. Don't turn up wearing a team's top. If you're umpiring, your team, don't come up wearing your team's top. Wear something different. National League umpires, make sure you've got the official gear. Be there a minimum of 30 minutes before your match, and I really want to stress that is an absolute minimum, especially for National League, and lower down 30 minutes. 30 minutes is a minimum. You should be there. You need to be able to just talk to your colleague. You need to be able to talk to coaches. You need to be able to look at the pitch, see if there's any problems, etc. You need to be able to warm up properly. you need to be able to get yourself in the frame of mind for the game. Turning up 5, 10 minutes beforehand, 15 minutes beforehand doesn't allow you to do that. So that's an important part. Pre-match chat with your colleague. Talk to them. What are we going to do? How are we umpiring this? Any problems from last week? Any interpretations we want to talk about? Have that chat so you can again ensure consistency. I mentioned this last year, and I still think this would be a really, really important element. I would love to see it brought in, which is bringing the two managers stroke coaches together for 5 minutes before the game. Inside that sort of 30 minutes before the game, bring the two coaches together, two managers together, however, for 5 minute chat, just to discuss what is your problems, what's the issues, this is how we're going to do this. So there's no surprises. And also that starts to garner the respect issue because you're talking to them and there's a communication channel being opened. However, I'm aware that that's not necessarily always going to be possible, but please, if it is possible, try and do it. It's important in your pre-match chat that you have a plan A, plan B, plan C. Plan A of lovely, open, flowing hockey, playing the advantage, everything gets on, the players understood your line in the sand, everything brilliant. Doesn't happen all the time. So what's plan B? Is plan B going back to actually, draconian, no advantages, take that for free from there, to try and bring the game back under control? And plan C, do we have a plan C? Is that bringing the captains in, or is plan C an amalgamation of plan A and plan B? But always have and back up to what you're doing. Don't just go in with plan A, because 9 times out of 10, that plan A will fall apart at some point during the game, and you've got to have a backup. And to make sure you have the backup, you've got to be able to speak to your colleague. And a simple one: read the FIH briefing and the Scottish hockey regulations. Know what you're umpiring. Nice and simple. So that's before we get on the pitch. I'm going to take if anybody's any questions or comments at this point before we move on, just to sort of more focused areas. Nope. Silence. Okay, so if anybody wants to ask questions tonight, just stick your hand up in the Zoom. So we're going to go back to the communication, the one which was key, which was in both players and coaches, and also the FIH briefing, the presentation element of it. When people talk about communication, they often talk about communication. Umpires often talk about communication with their colleagues. Oh, I've got to get my radio protocol right, and or I've got to have my communication before the game. But actually, for me, there's 4 methods or 4 areas of communication, and that's with the coaches, stroke managers, with the players, with your colleagues, and also, depending on the situation, with the crowd. And each of those requires a little bit of skill and different skill and different way of thinking about it. So if we take each of those, the coaches, how do you communicate with the coaches? Quite often, interaction with coaches is confrontational, is negative. Let's try and move away from that. Let's try and move towards working with the coaches. The coaches are the ones who can control their players. So let's have that conversation before the game. Let's make sure the coaches are aware what's happening. How are we doing it? The coaches are always going to have their emotions high because they've invested a lot in that game, as have we. So just be aware of those sorts of things and respect what they're trying to do. And hopefully they'll respect what you try to do, but you earn that respect through high quality, consistent decisions. But make yourself available to coaches, managers. Make sure it's a two-way process. The players, actually, I'm going to go into colleagues next. The colleagues, if you have radios, less is more, guys. Don't continuously chat and talk through the radios. Don't whistle. Don't sing. That the radios then become noise. Use the radios for communication as a tool to communicate something. You need to do this. Oh, my colleague needs help. It's a penalty corner. Oh, yes, that did hit a foot. No, I didn't think that was happening there. Oh, be aware of what's happening just by your left-hand post. But don't consistently talk. Don't talk about the weather. Don't chat about what's happening. Don't say, "Oh, wonderful decision." You know, you can say good advantage, but you don't make a background noise. So use your radios wisely. Talk about the communication before the game. Have that in place. Have your plan A, your plan B, your plan C. Maybe even have something you can say in the radio like it's time to move to plan B now. So have that. Make sure you have that communication. The crowd. If you're lucky enough to have a crowd at your game, you're communicating with the crowd as well. That can be through your whistle tone, it can be through, and that's obviously with your players and coaches as well. It can be through your signals, it can be through your body language. But it's interesting, everything I said about the crowd also affects the coaches and players. So actually, if you get used to doing that day in, day out, when you do have a crowd, you're automatically communicating with them because you're already using your whistle tone, your soft whistle for nothing foul, your harder whistle for a foul which you're not liking, you're drawing your line in the sand. Verbal communication, that's not 5 meters. That's why I've given it. In my view, that was a stick tackle. So you're starting that communication. And as soon as you start getting that type of communication with the coaches and players, it'll transgress to the crowd. I'd say lastly, the players. And with the players, this is the key link. We need to communicate with the players. Don't be defensive. Don't be afraid to communicate with them. Be open. Respect what they're trying to do. And hopefully they'll respect what you're trying to do. If a player asks you a question politely, what was that for? If it's appropriate, very quickly say, "Oh, you went through the back of his stick," and that's it. Or in my view, went through the back stick. Oh, it hit his foot, or that was an obstruction. Communicate. Tell them why. Don't ignore, because that's when frustrations happen. So have that two-way communication with players. We're not saying a constant chat throughout the game. It is quick, sharp communication. It's not a full-scale conversation. It's when you have a chance to break in the play, etc. But primarily, the players will see your whistle and your body language. So use them. They're your primary tools. Nothing foul. A small little whistle, a quiet peep, and nothing foul. There's nothing there. And that can be very powerful if some two players have come together and actually it's just a coming together, but there's something which has happened, which means it's a foul. But there's nothing in it. So just sorry guys, it's just two players come together. Hey ho, it's happened. Let's get on with the game. To then stepping up to you're annoyed to the stronger whistle. And your communication with your arm and your body language, then the shoulders back, the higher, the pointing of your finger, those sorts of elements. The more you get frustrated, the more you get annoyed with what's happening, the more you want to emphasize that is something which is not acceptable on the pitch, and the players will pick up on that. Nope. Someone just dropped a dinner. So use those communication, but always remember to be to respect that player and respect what's happening, but also that you are the one who is there on the pitch to ensure fairness and control. So you're in control. I'm just going to show a video, very quick video, and whilst it says crowding, at this point, I actually want to show it to watch Gregory's body language the whole way through this. He's given the decision. He's open. Oh, he's got one person. He's remained in control. He's remained open. He's listened to the player. He's asked what's going on, and then he's made a clear communication to his colleagues. And I just think that's a really good example of how you can communicate with a player. He's got control, one person only. He's then remained open. There's nothing closed about his body language. He hasn't backed off. He hasn't moved towards the player. He's remained open. He's listened to what they said. He's repeated what they said. He's answered the question, and then he's talked to his colleague. So that's basically I think likes to set the scene. So again, just at this point, any questions or any comments to be made? Nope. Okay, we'll move on. Um, so the 3D skills, the game is becoming more and more 3D. It's being played more and more in the air. And I think it's really important that we encourage this. It's happening international level, and it's important that we're encouraging this the whole way down the pyramid in Scottish hockey, from National League down to the district leagues, and then down into youth college competitions. As it says here, and the FIH has said, 3D skills are very exciting, good for the game, good for spectators. You know, the ball's in the air, the players are moving the ball in the air, they're lifting it over sticks. Aerials over people's heads are more common. Um, However, what we've got to remember is that we're not Hurley, we're not Camogie, or we're not Shinty. You can't sit and tap the ball the whole way up the pitch, because that essentially will become an obstruction. As it says there, they must still allow their opponents to fairly contest for the ball. So yeah, a couple of taps in there, fine. Yes, that's fine, no problem. But we're not trying to be Shinty. We're not trying to be Camogie here. Hockey is still a game where actually you've got to have a fair contest for the ball. But we've got to encourage 3D skills. Just because the ball's in the air doesn't mean to say that we have to blow. Just because the ball is close to a player in the air doesn't mean to say we have to blow. The important point here is the second point. 3D skills must not cause danger to opponents or make them take evasive action. Again, it clarifies that further above knee height close to opponent may, and this is an important word, may be considered dangerous and a free hit awarded against the ball carrier. A little looped ball from 5 meters away, which is falling onto somebody's thigh when they're not able to, when they're able to see it in a clear view, it's not dangerous. There's no speed to it. It's not dangerous to the person. That's a free against them for the ball hitting their body. However, a ball raised into the thigh from a meter away when the player's got no chance to react is dangerous and should be blown as such. But this is the skill in the area we've got to look at as umpires, is what is danger? Where's the danger caused? Is the player taking legitimate evasive action? Or taking evasive action? It's not the word legitimate, it's no longer there. So taking evasive action. Are they having to, for their own safety, to move out of the way of the ball? Or is it leading to somebody coming in for a big swipe? Well, actually, if that big swipe is somebody else, who's created the danger? Think about it. Knee height's good, a good proxy for danger, but it's not the be all and end all. So just think about 3D skills. I think this is a very important part of our game, which we as umpires are still learning to umpire quicker and in a more controlled manner. But try and encourage it where it's safe. Don't let players turn it into, as I say, camogie or shinty. Think of it purely and simply as danger. And again, I'm just going to go through to the FIH video in this one, Pro League. You know, balls near above waist height, still above knee height, no problem. Still, look, no issue at all. Oh, just look at the height of the ball. It's above knee height, but absolutely no danger at all. Let's get on with it. It's close to the player. So just think, what is the danger? What are we creating? Look here. There you go. No issue whatsoever. He's not dribbling the ball on the top of the stick. The player can still compete, but that's a really good skill. Let him. Look, the player's in no position to tackle. They're not. So like he's moving the ball in the air. The player's still in no position to tackle. So no, let's just get on with it. encourage that type of play? Let's do one more. Again here, well above knee height. Free was not for the 3D skills because he just clattered into the player. But again, well above knee height, but no danger. Let's get on with the game. Oh, my mouse has decided to. So if you see these examples, think of it purely in danger. Try to encourage that type of skill because actually it's really fun and it's good and it's exciting and it makes our game look good and it allows the player to show off their skill. So again, as per previously, any kind of questions, any comments?
Hi, Neil.
Nothing. Oh, hi, Jed.
Hi, Neil. I think you've done a really good explanation of that. I just would like to just make one comment, if I may, is that the concern that the FIH Rules Committee had, which is why they brought that into the current briefing, is the challenge that it gives defenders in being able to legitimately tackle for the ball when the ball is raised above knee height. And it comes under the context of danger, of which we would probably agree it's actually not dangerous at all, but it's where they found its place in the kind of rules. But it's so that defenders aren't left somewhere in limbo as to, if I tackle and get this wrong, is this going to be a penalty corner? Because it looks horrendous, but actually it's not horrendous. It's a legitimate attempt to get to the ball. And I think all I would caution umpires here is to remember that defenders are allowed to defend. And if the ball is close to them, it doesn't mean it's a foul just because it's close to them. But they must be allowed to go about their business and defend with a fair as you said quite rightly, a fair contest for the ball. And it's just to keep that in mind. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely, Jed. If you rightly say, defenders have to have the ability, and I say we're not trying to turn this into Camogie or whatever, Shinty. So I think that's a really important part. Is think of it. What's each person trying to do? Any further comments, questions? No. Okay. The breakdown. This was interestingly, it was more of a player's concern than it was from the coaches. And I've tried to bring this into why I think it's kind of three different areas, and one of them is also the persistent fouling, which the players raised. There's easy breakdown to spot, the physical breakdown. You see it there on the left, two guys sandwiching the guy. It's a physical breakdown. It's obvious. Everybody can see it. That's simple. There's those elements which are persistent fouling, small, low-level fouls. The little stick chop. Oh, I accidentally hit their stick when they were leaving their 23. The defender's moving out. Oh, look, they can't play that ball up to their forward now. Those kind of, oh, look, my foot's accidentally got in the way. Or consistently just the body's going in the way of the ball. So just persistently breaking down, just persistently stopping the player from showing their skill. It needs to be recognised as early as possible. And then the non-physical breakdown, which is kind of the slightly harder one to see. And the most obvious, and some of the examples I'll show you here, are stopping a free hit being taken quickly. Standing in the way. Oh, whoops! I'm accidentally standing in the way, or just obstructing. Oh, look! I'm going to stop and obstructed the player. That's stopped them. So for me, the breakdown, there's kind of these sort of three areas. There's the physical breakdown, the really obvious ones. There's those kind of persistent fouling. The chop of the stick from the back consistently happening. The little foot gets in the way, or the little knock of the ball away, etc. And there's a non-physical, which can be things such as breaking down the free hit. um, etc. Again, rather than me trying to talk through these, I think I'm going to show some of the FIH videos on these. And the first one we're going to do is kind of the non-physical breakdown, and that's deliberately stopping the play. Hey, look here. You see nothing happen, but no need to just knock the ball away at the end there. That was a very deliberate attempt to slow the play down. That frustrates players. So please try and pick up on those sorts of areas. That is as much a breakdown as other areas. It's deliberately stopping the person playing the ball. Another example here. You know, quick free. She wants to take a quick free hit. Oh, look, I'm accidentally standing in the way. Oh, look, I'm trying to get. Oh, I'm shadowing the person. Just be aware of that. Defender could have just either stood there or moved out of the way. Instead, they've chosen basically to follow the player. So again, it's breaking down, it's stopping the quick flow of the player. And it was what we're talked about at the start of this, encouraging speed, encouraging quick flow, encouraging the game to be played. But just those sorts of areas aware. And the last one, this is probably the most obvious one. Like, really? You know, the player had no reason to get involved there, and the stood, and they've deliberately chosen to go and stand in front of it to stop the quick free hit being taken. So just think, those are all sort of those are breakdowns, but they're all non-physical. They're just stopping the quick flow of the play. Easy ones, the spot down. Yeah, that's one of the worst ones I've seen for quite a while. But physical. It's a very obvious physical breakdown. And that's sliding tackle. Did he make contact? Like, no, the players continued on, but he caused the player to stop he's lost the momentum, he's broken down the play, he's achieved exactly what he wants to do. That's physical. Also, in terms of sliding tackles, you've got to think the player's put himself there deliberately, the player's done that deliberately. So what's the appropriate penalty at this point? So again, just thinking, going back down to the breakdown, just don't think of it being those big physical challenges. There's the non-physical stuff, and that's what frustrates players. Let's cut it out. Let's get out of the game. Let's manage it early from the game. Guys, move 500 meters out of the way. Don't stand there. Move out of the way. Not saying you're coaching the players, but encourage and make sure that the players understand what you're trying to do. Right. Again, this is a slide actually straight. I just lifted this slide from last year, and it's not often I do this sort of thing, but breakdown, recognize and manage all breakdowns, the different types of breakdowns, manage them early. Don't let them become a problem. If you're seeing a player consistently doing the same stick tackle, if you're seeing a player consistently standing over the ball, manage it really early. Think about what is the player trying to do. Is it trying to stop a tackle? Is it trying to stop a quick free hit? Is it trying to stop a pass? It can be as much attack or stopping a defender coming out of the 23. That's as much of a breakdown as a defender stopping an attacker going into 23 or circle. Again, look at the game as a whole. What's the pattern of the game? That decision in isolation, a simple, oh, it's hit my foot, or, oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't get out of the way quick enough. In isolation might be nothing, but actually, is there a pattern throughout the game? What's happening? Pick that up. Be consistent with your penalties. Don't pull a rabbit out of a hat and all of them automatically show a yellow or card for something which has been nothing throughout the game. Be consistent. Think about what you're doing. What are they trying to do? Manage it earlier. And importantly, don't interfere with flows interrupters. Remember that last one? The guys slid in, like his Chinese player slid in against the French. Slid in. The French player was still able to lift the ball over, was still able to break through, moving towards the 23. However, deal with that afterwards. But don't interrupt the flow immediately. Let the player play on. and enjoy the game, enjoy the space he's got in front of him, and show his skill. Again, consistent low-level breakdowns lead to high-level management issues. Deal with it early, deal with it at source. And I think that's a really important part of our umpiring, because if players get frustrated, that means um, our job becomes much more difficult. In terms of the breakdown, any questions, comments? Sorry, guys, I need to use this as an opportunity to get some water as well. No, nothing. Okay. This one's more difficult to get videos on, but I've tried to when I've been listening to players and the coaches, I've tried to create a pyramid in the idea of physicality compete. Players have, as Jed said earlier on, players have got a job to do. Defenders are there to defend, attackers are there to attack. They've got to be able to do that job, and they've got to be able to compete. And we've got to allow that to happen, because that's what our sport's about. It's about the element of skill and stopping an attack, or the element of an attacker neutralizing the defensive skill, to create goals, create opportunity, create excitement. So one of the things at the bottom of the pyramid is allow players to contest, allow contest of the ball. Just because two players are coming together and there's a bit of noise, two sticks happen to hit each other, or there's the two bodies are leaning against each other, etc. Allow a competition for the ball, a contest. That's easy. We can all see that. We can all allow that to happen. Just because two players come together doesn't mean to say it's an automatic free hit. Just because two sticks hit each other doesn't mean to say it's an automatic free hit. Allow a contest. That's the excitement of sport. Allow it. That's the bottom level. The top of the pyramid is the physical. What we saw earlier on, in terms of I think it was the Argentinian player, just basically absolutely ramming into somebody. That's not on. That's physical. Going through the back of somebody, that's just physical. Tripping them up, physical, not allowed. That's the difference. That's a physical play. There's compete, and in the middle is the grey area we talked about earlier on, the unequal contest, as I've called it. If somebody else can come up with a better phrase, please feel free to say it. When one player's stronger than the other, happens to be stronger, two shoulders come together, and one player happens to be stronger because they've spent longer in the gym and they've spent longer training, etc. Or when they've maybe they're being more physical than the other player, another person. When it becomes unequal, we've got to decide then, is that physical or is that a contest? And that's just where the grey area is coming in. But I think we've got to allow players to compete. We've got to allow players the chance. If they can legitimately reach the ball, we've got to allow them a chance to do it. They cannot come through a player. They cannot push the player. We're not a non-contact sport, we're a semi-contact sport. So we've got to allow that contest to happen. When it reaches a certain threshold and level, which is impossible to define, when it becomes physical, that's when we as umpires have to get involved. And the area in the middle, the unequal contest, where we've got to use our skill as umpires to decide, actually, is that because one player's trained better? Is that because they've got a little bit better skill? Is that because they've managed to get there first, and therefore they should have the advantage in the free? But I think it's really important that as an umpiring group, we don't remove all contact from the sport. It is part of our sport. We're not a contact sport, but we've got to allow a contest. Unfortunately, it's really difficult to get videos for this, and it's probably the most difficult concept to explain. And therefore, I would anticipate questions at this point. Or comments. Does anybody have any questions or comments at this point?
Neil, it's John Hearn here.
I
I
do.
think I think this slide is really important in terms of we're talking about encouraging our umpires to be brave, but obviously be sensible. And I think this is an area where bravery and common sense absolutely comes to the fore. You asked about how do you determine how much physical is too physical. And I'm a great believer that you really pick up on the players' reactions to the fouls. Now, some players will try to test you to find out where your tolerance levels are, and that's absolutely fine. But this is us wandering into an area where I think we sometimes overmanage games when it's not needed. Now, that management element is needed when the game becomes hot and the players are becoming tense and becoming noisier, but it's recognizing, where your tolerance levels are, you and your colleagues' tolerance levels are, and then that's when you start to crank up the management and restrict flow and use the communication skills that you were referring to earlier on. That was the only comment I wanted to make regarding that slide.
Yeah. Anyone else? No. I think, as John said, this is a really important area of what we do. Because if we overmanage, we cause problems for ourselves. Um, but you've got to decide, and it goes back to the preparation element, and maybe even talking to coaches, etc. Where is that unequal contest? Where is that middle area when it's not physical, when it's not a fair contest, when it's not an equal contest? And you've got to decide, and you've got to be consistent with that throughout the whole of the season. No, nobody else. Okay. I hesitated to go back to aerials again because it's something which happens every year, and something which comes up. However, it was brought up by players and to coaches, not as a top five, but it is their coaches. But interestingly, in terms of the coaches, it was the compete part of aerials, which they say we're not being consistent with. Excuse me. The rule is simple. Players must not approach within 5 meters from the opponent, receiving a falling raised ball until it's received, control, and on the ground. Ball may be intercepted within 5 meters, but outside of playing distance, as long as done safely. Initial receivers are right to the ball. If it's not clear which player's initial receiver, the player of the team that raised the ball must allow the opponent to receive it. Simple, black and white, on a page. Much more difficult to umpire on the ground, or off the ground, as the case may be. So, practicality, and Jed earlier on, Jed did give me a piece of advice, I remember years ago. And it's one which has always stuck me when dealing with aerials. Once the ball's in the air and going straight forward, it isn't going to move or deviate. It's going to go up. It's going to continue in that plane. It's not going to change. You don't need to watch the ball at that point. You can find out where it's going to land. Who's there? Who's in position to receive it? And who will get to the ball first? If there's a contest, is it fair? Is there a clear receiver? If it's dropping into a crowd, blow it early. And that saves so much problem. If an intercepted ball, play on if it's safe. Again, if it's done deliberately, we can manage it on. But the key to all of this is very much make a decision early. Have a look, see what's going to happen early. If there's a possibility of interception, allow interception. If it's poor skill of half of the defender, or the receiver, and they receive the ball and it bounces 3 meters off and somebody runs in and takes it, don't reward them. So always think about this. I am going to show some videos on this. Again, we have this is perennial, it comes up year upon year, but please just think about it. Keep it simple. When the ball goes up, look to see where it's going to land, who's in position, who can legitimately intercept, and don't reward the poor skill. I'm going to use some videos on this. I think this is a very good one, actually. Play on. Okay, the guy's in 5 meters, but play on. Again, he's come within the 5 meters. Well, just play on. Allow the player to have the skill. Showcase the skill. That little hesitation on the whistle, showcase it. Let's allow the player to score a goal in the second opportunity. You can see what it is up here. Again, we're seeing we're lifted, but play on. He's within 5 meters, but actually, who was in the place to receive the ball? Certainly not the blue, not the Indian player. Good skill by the Canadian. Let's play on. Let's get to it. Again, just looking here. Lifted. He's picked it up safely. He hasn't come through the behind from the player. He hasn't touched the player. The Belgian player wasn't in the position to receive the ball. The Dutch players come in and intercept it safely. Let's get on with this game. Yeah. Play. There's two elements to that. The defenders come in and obviously close the space down. The easy decision would be a very quick free hit, but actually just either hold your whistle or quick whistle to allow the person to use the space, the player to use the space. You can see the whole pitch is opened up in front of her. So use that. Think about what's happening. Think of the whole area, the whole thing as a whole. She's got the skills. She's got the ball under control. She's got the pitch open in front of her now. Don't interfere and don't interrupt. Again, I think this is an important one. It's for the interception. If you watch it again very quickly, you think, oh, he's intercepted that cleanly. Oh, have they really? The Japanese players actually in position and within playing distance of the ball. The South African has run in front of him, has thrown himself not in control and intercepted the ball. The fact he's got it in his stick, actually that's a free hit to the attacker because they were in position, they were in playing distance of the ball. The other person's come in from the side, not really in control, and is intercepted in a dangerous manner. So I think that's an important one. Not all interceptions can be allowed to go. Remember, the rule was said it has to be done safely and legitimately. And just the last one on the aerials. Oh, I've lost my cursor. Okay, I've lost my cursor and my videos. There we go. And again, I think this is a very important one. If you watch it again, my cursors. This attackers picked it up in space, but look at the red English player has come in, closed them down, has cut off legitimate passes to them. They're within 5 meters before it's control. So you've got to make a decision. That point is a free hit, penalty corner, etc. And you can see there that the top left of the screen is a penalty corner. So I think it's important to remember that whilst the rule is simple, there are various ways in what happens, but keep it simple. Look at what's happening. Look at what the player is trying to do. Look at the outcome. Shall we blow our whistle quickly? Shall we let it go and let it develop? I think that's really important when we're dealing with aerials. Reduce the grey area. And that's it. Try and be consistent. It's no two situations the same, but consistently apply the rules of skill, advantage, and allowing the game to flow. Any comments, questions? Nope. These are kind of the last. Those were the kind of the.
Can I ask you, Jerry McGuinness here? I'm looking at it from a coach, a goalkeeper, and an umpire perspective. when the ball is lifted and aerialed into the D, and the goalkeeper is already there, certainly at lower levels over the last couple of years, the consensus in umpiring appears to be that the goalkeeper's got pads on and a helmet. So it's quite okay for the attacker to encroach and hit the ball first time. Now, as far as I am aware, and correct me if I'm wrong, the rules are the same for a goalkeeper. If the goalkeeper's already there in the D and is first in that area for the ball dropping, then surely that's a free hit.
So yes, if the goalkeeper's there and is essentially the receiver, if you think about it as a player, if essentially receiver the ball, yes, then they have the right to play the ball and bring it down. The fact that the goalkeeper's got pads on doesn't allow a player to come in and swing and hit him in the chest. So,
Okay.
so it's a free out, in my opinion.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Neil, can I come in on the
Yep.
back of that, please?
Yep.
We have to be careful that the goalkeeper is clearly going to be in the D, because that's where they play most of the game. But it doesn't entitle them to the ball just because they're in the D. As you
Yes.
quite rightly said, it's were they the initial receiver, i.e., was it going to where they are? We have to also reflect that not all the passes that are intended go to where they were meant to go to, and quite often they will go into a free space. And that's when you often have two players coming together, and therefore that would be a free hit against the raising team because it's two players coming together. But we have to just watch, just because people are within a certain area of the pitch doesn't give them carte blanche entitlement to the ball. It's were they the initial receiver or not? And that's as you quite rightly said, that's the first thing that we're looking at.
I actually agree with that, but my comment is
were they on
based
their own, were they two people together, and all that other variances.
But you very rarely get, at
Sorry,
lower levels, you very rarely get someone blowing
Okay.
and giving the free hit for where the ball is going to drop. You tend to find that it's either given against the goalkeeper for encroaching, or it's given against the attacker for being too close to the goalkeeper.
It's no different, as Jay said, in the circle than it is anywhere else in the pitch. If the ball is coming in on top of the goalkeeper and the goalkeeper's receiver, then they have got the right to bring the ball down and play the ball. That's simple. If it's going into space and the two players are coming together, as Jay said, it's the team who lifted the ball. If the two players are coming together, if it's clearly going to the attacker and the goalkeeper runs in, well, it's exactly the same as if a defender runs in outside of the pitch. You just got to put the appropriate penalty because it's in the circle.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's what you're trying to say, Jed, hopefully.
Well, I was still in the process of trying to say that. Yeah, thanks.
So, okay, cheers.
Yes, cheers, Jed. Thanks.
Just, I mean, obviously, as I say, that these were that was the last of kind of the sort of the technical areas which, you know, players and coaches and the FIA should be talked about. There are obviously lots of other areas around umpiring which could be looked at. You know, we've talked about the breakdown, but also deliberately hitting the ball away. Just lots of other areas. Go read the FIH briefing. But a couple of things in general, which Scottish Hockey have in the past asked about. And one is player behaviour. Enforce what's written in the Scottish Hockey regulations. As it says, our act of outburst and misconduct, not good for the sport. We're trying to create a spectacle. And also impacts your ability to manage the game. Talked about this last year, and again, Scottish Hockey still has a Clean Air Act, should be enforced. Again, don't accept crowding. We saw Gregory Uitenhoff earlier on in the first clip we show where he said, look, one player comes. Enforce that very early on in the game. He even mentioned at the very start before we get in the game. One player may approach an umpire and no more. Hopefully it's the captain, but one player. If more than one player does it, be proactive and move them on, move them away, manage the situation. And if a crowd continues to approach, use appropriate penalties. That's really important for both the spectacle of the game and you're managing it. It's not all one way. And we talked about respect earlier on. We've got to respect the managers and coaches and the players hopefully will do that, but they've also got to respect us. And so be proactive, enforce what the tools you have in front of you. And then lastly, I'm virtually in time, we talked all about these really technical issues, etc. As umpires, we have a series of tools in front of us. Those management tools before we even get the card. We talked about the body language, the whistle tone, the communicating with the players, etc. We then have obviously cards. Keep this consistent. Look at the FIA's briefing on this. Green card, playing the ball after the whistle, of interference. The breakdown we're talking about earlier on. Off the ball, minor physical, pushing, holding the sticks. Again, beware of the difference between physical and competing. Breakdown of play, low impact, consistent. We talk about that sort of maybe consistent filing, consistent deliberate small files. You can go to the next one, and we just talked about it, minor misconduct, criticizing or crowding the umpire. Be consistent with this. Don't start pulling out yellow cards for things which you pulled green cards out for. Don't start putting red cards out for something which you showed a yellow card for. So be consistent. Read the FAH briefing on this. Look at this. This slide shows it all. Penalty, yellow cards. We talked about it, playing the ball afterwards with high impact and play or repeated offences. Go back to the breakdown. Breakdown of play with high impact. Again, where is it in the pitch? How are we doing? What's the impact? How's the impact the game? How's the impact in the player? Physical fouls. Again, remember the difference between physical and competing. And importantly, repeated offences in the green card area. Players should pick up if you've got a green card, you've crossed their line in the sand, you've done it once, you've got a green card. Don't consistently give out 3, 4, 5 green cards for the same offence. In fact, even two green cards is starting to push things. But just be aware, repeating the same offence. Let's use the tools we have in our management box. 10 minutes. High impact, deliberate breakdowns in regard to player safety. Remember, I think it was the Argentinian earlier on who basically body checked the guy. Absolutely no regard to the safety, really dangerous. Physical players, off your feet, sliding, stick tackles, which are your, hand height, etc. Or again, repeated technical yellow card offences, and this is an important one. That doesn't mean to say just because somebody's got 2 yellow cards, you're automatically going to give a red. It's going to be unusual, not the situation, but repeated technical yellow card offences. Primarily, the ones I always think of is the captain's card. So those are sort of use the cards, the appropriate penalties. Again, comments at this point?
Neil, it's John Hearn here again. Sorry, just a quick one. I need to certainly at the high level or the elite level, they're not talking about high impact, low impact. They're now talking about intent.
Yep.
So I would like to see that reflected in certainly in our Premiership. It's more about the player's intent, and that's how you determine the level of escalation, if that makes sense to people.
Yep. Anything else? Okay. Just some thought points to take from the FAH briefing. What we're trying to do, and what we're trying to do as umpires and as umpiring cohort, is encourage an exciting, flowing game of hockey. So some of the thought points: protect skill. We talked about earlier on. The first things we're there to make sure the game's played fairly and safely. So enhance player safely. Be strict around the physical aspect. But again, I will keep going back to this. The difference between being physical and competing. So always trying to think of that in what you're doing. I think it extends the ball in there. There's difference in the game becoming more physical versus physical play, eliminating skill. And that's a really important area. And we don't want to overmanage the game. We don't want to continuously stop the game. We just want the game to be played safely. Promote flow. common sense approach to free hit management. If a ball happens to be rolling 1 meter away from where the free was in the middle of the pitch, just let them get on with it, as long as they haven't taken players out of the game. Don't allow players to break down, the little knock the ball away, or continued running with the ball after the free hit's been given. And again, breaking down the play, it doesn't have to be the massive, big, obvious physical breakdowns. It can be the consistent little filing. Just how is it impacting the game? We want the game to flow. We want the players in the ball. We want them to show the skill. Possession tackling. Think again, appropriate technical and a personal penalty, depending on where it takes place, what's happened, how it's impacting on the game, and I've come up with the appropriate technical or personal penalty. Again, important part of a game, distinguishing poor skill and deliberate and dangerous actions. How you manage those will be very different. And allow the 3D skills is an important, exciting part of our game. And I think the most important element, and I think the best phrase in the whole of the FH briefing, use common sense. Understand what the players are trying to do. That's a key element. They're trying to do something, you're trying to do something. And actually what we're both trying to do is to create an exciting game of hockey. So use your common sense. Don't pull things out of midair. Just use your understanding of the game. And last is season aims for all umpires, and I've kind of used this, and I think we'll put it in this kind of circle. I think firstly, we're starting the left-hand side is accuracy. Make sure decisions are accurate, as accurate as you possibly can make them. Make sure we're in a good position on the pitch to see things. Make sure the play is coming towards us. Make sure that we understand what the players are trying to do. Be consistent with your decisions. Don't bring your own interpretation in. Follow the FIH briefing. So really be consistent with decisions. If you're accurate and consistent, you'll gain respect. If you gain respect from players, that makes your job so much, and players and coaches, that makes your job so much easier. Create a showcase for the game. The game is there to be played. We're there to encourage people to enjoy it. So create that showcase. And lastly, the players. We're here for the players. Hopefully the respect will come from the players, and you give the players respect and they'll give you respect. We're here for them. We're here to allow them to show their skill, to show the game off. Yes, they can't have a game without us, but equally we wouldn't have a game without them. So I think it's really important. So I think for me, if we can get the accuracy higher and be consistent, the rest will all follow. And lastly, enjoy it. Have a smile on your face. Enjoy it. We're all there. We're not doing this, for money. We're there because we enjoy the sport. We're there because we're umpires. We want to be involved in sport. We want to do the sport to the highest level. Have fun. There's no danger in having fun. And that's me. But I suppose now, again, lastly, any questions from anybody?